You should be your trustee, and here's why. First, most trustees are revocable trusts that we set up for our own benefit. We place our assets in it so that we can avoid probate, but then also those assets can be used for our benefit while we're, say, incapacitated. You should be your initial trustee of the trust. You're gonna run those assets and use those assets for your own benefit. But that's probably not why you're watching this video. You wanna talk about successor trustees, while a grantor or a trustor, the person who originally sets up a trust, is gonna be the initial trustee and is gonna use those assets for their own benefit. It's the successor trustees that most people get hung up on. A successor trustee is that person we appoint to follow after the initial trustee in administering the trust. Successor trustees are wildly important to making sure the terms of a trust are followed. Now, normal trusts will have an initial trustee who's designated to act on behalf of the trust initially. Then there will be a list of successor trustees. And after the initial trustee becomes incapacitated, resigns, or passes away, then successor trustee number 1 will be designated. And then maybe if they're incapacitated or resign or are unwilling to serve as trustee, then successor number 2 and 3 and so on. Your successor trustee can be an individual or maybe a corporate entity like a corporate trustee. Now there's pros and cons between those, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Your successor trustee, what you need to know is that person that you designate to run your trust. Now, whenever we're thinking about who the successor trustee should be, we need to think about who's going to be best suited to follow your wishes and to take care of your assets and your beneficiaries. Who's going to be most suited to take care of your assets and your beneficiaries. Now, sometimes I'll have clients come in and they say, oh man, I've got 2 kids and I want them to both be responsible for running my trust, right? I want them to both partake. I don't want to put all the burden on one child. I always advise them against that. First, if there's just 2, what are we going to do if they disagree? We need a tiebreaker. Second, whenever we designate someone to be our successor trustee, we're putting a very significant responsibility on them. We need to weigh who's going to be best fit to shoulder this responsibility. Many times, one child or one of the beneficiaries who might be receiving the assets under this trust, who we might want to be a successor trustee, isn't well fit to run the trust. For example, say one child lives here close to mom or dad, and then one child lives 4 states over. Obviously, we want the child close to the assets, close to mom and dad, to be the successor trustee if mom or dad were to become incapacitated, right? Because they're going to be close and able to handle those affairs. Or whenever they pass, they'll be better suited because they're here and can wrap up the estate much quicker. So, whenever we're talking about a successor trustee, it's going to be who's best suited for running the trust. Now, let's talk about best suited because that can change over time. And this brings in one of the most important topics with trust. When do I amend my trust? Most of the time, I'm going to be suggesting to clients that they only amend their trust during major life events, births, deaths, weddings, divorces, right? And for your trustee and successor trustee, this is especially important. I'm a young man. I have young children. One day, I want my son or sons or daughters, one of them, whoever is going to be best fit, to run my trust for their benefit. But that's not today. My oldest is like barely 6 years old. That won't work. So I will appoint someone else, say my father or a cousin, right? Someone who can take care of my kids. Probably the same person I'm going to appoint as their guardian. But 20 years from now, my father may not be in a position where he can run the trust for their benefit. At that point, it might be a good idea to maybe nominate my 26-year-old son, depending on how mature he is and well-developed he is at that point, to run the trust as the successor trustee. That's one of the most important amendments that we can make to our trust. So obviously we're going to designate our successor trustees, but we also have to be vigilant on making sure they still stay current and we have the right people involved. If a successor trustee dies, obviously we can't use them in our trust to administer our trust assets for our beneficiaries. So we need to make sure we amend that trust to get the right person in. Now, whenever we're talking about successor trustees, we really do need to talk about one final important factor. And that factor is trust. If you actually go down to it, the name of the document that we're talking about is a trust. If we don't trust our successor trustees, unfortunately, your trust will not work. And actually, it can cause major problems. My very first lawsuit as a lawyer was all about enforcing the terms of the trust. A successor trustee was not doing what they were supposed to do. I'll just paint the picture. Mom lived here in Oklahoma. Daughter, who lived here in Oklahoma, and daughter who lived out of state. Mom was ill health. She sold her home, bought a bigger home and put it in a trust. And she moved into big home. And Oklahoma daughter moved in with her. Everything was great. They avoided having to send mom to nursing homes. They were able to take great care of mom. But when mom passed, unfortunately, Oklahoma daughter really enjoyed having a free house and no rent and using mom's money to live on and buy cars and take vacations. She was wasting mom's money, whereas the trust said to split everything, including the house, evenly between Oklahoma daughter and out-of-state daughter. So out-of-state daughter hired us. I still remember the day going to that house, knocking on the door with the sheriff and telling that family they have to get out. Whenever we identify a successor trustee, we have to make sure this is someone who will follow our wishes. If they won't follow our wishes, we're just asking for heartache later. So, whenever we're picking those successor trustees, think hard about who you trust. If you have any questions or you want to walk through it, call me and we can talk about it, okay? And of course, always set up an appointment with me so we can sit down and make sure your concerns are addressed.